The sun was just beginning to dip beyond the horizon when Daniel led his little girl, Sophie, across the quiet stretch of beach. The evening was warm, the waves gentle, and the orange sky painted everything in gold. For Daniel, this walk had become a ritual, a way to end the day with peace after hours spent under the hood of cars at the garage. Sophie loved collecting shells, running with her small bucket bouncing at her side, and Daniel loved the chance to breathe, even if just for an hour. He thought the night would end like any other, quiet, simple, safe. But fate had a different plan. Sophie had darted ahead, calling out that she spotted a shiny shell near the waterline. Daniel smiled, following at his own pace, when he saw her stop suddenly. The bucket dropped to the sand. "Daddy," she cried. "There's someone there." Daniel's eyes shot forward. A woman lay collapsed at the edge of the surf, the waves lapping at her legs. She wasn't moving. Adrenaline surged. He sprinted, dropping to his knees beside her. She was young, maybe early 30s, dressed in what looked like an expensive sundress, now soaked and clinging to her body. Her skin was pale, lips tinged with blue. Daniel didn't hesitate. Years ago, when his wife was alive, he had taken a CPR class at her insistence. Now those lessons roared back. He tilted the woman's head, checked for breathing. Nothing. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He began chest compressions, counting under his breath, pushing against her sternum with the strength of a man fighting for someone's life. Then he sealed his mouth over hers, giving breaths of air, praying for a sign. Sophie stood frozen a few feet away, her small voice trembling. "Daddy, is she going to die?" "Not if I can help it," Daniel said, forcing calm into his tone. Minutes stretched into eternity, but finally, the woman convulsed, coughing up seawater. She gasped, choking, eyes fluttering open. Relief slammed through Daniel. "You're okay," he told her firmly. "You're safe." She blinked, dazed, focusing on him as though she had woken in a different world. An ambulance arrived shortly after, summoned by a bystander who had seen the commotion. Paramedics rushed in, lifting her onto a stretcher, but her gaze stayed fixed on Daniel, as if she couldn't let go of the man who had pulled her back from the edge. The chaos passed quickly, the flashing lights fading into the night. Daniel held Sophie close, reassuring her she'd been brave. They headed home, thinking that was the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, Daniel was sweeping the garage floor when a sleek black car pulled up. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, asking, "Are you Daniel Cooper?" Daniel nodded cautiously. "My employer would like to see you." Before Daniel could question further, the rear door opened, and out stepped the woman from the beach. Alive, radiant, her hair perfectly styled despite the hospital band still on her wrist. She looked nothing like the half-drowned figure he'd carried from the sand. "It's you," Daniel said, stunned. She smiled softly. "Yes, I'm Alina." He expected a simple thank you, maybe a handshake. Instead, she insisted on sitting down in the grease-stained garage, ignoring the curious stares of his coworkers. She looked around at the tools, the worn posters on the walls, and then at him. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "I don't know how to repay you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same." But Elena's eyes told him she didn't believe that. She had lived long enough in a world where people calculated every move, where kindness was rare and often carried a price tag. What Daniel had given her was something money couldn't buy: genuine selfless care. Over the following days, Elena returned. At first, she claimed it was just to thank him again, to check in. But slowly, the truth became clear. She wanted to know him, to understand the man who had breathed life back into her lungs. She brought Sophie small gifts, storybooks and seashell necklaces, though Daniel tried to refuse. She spent hours at the garage, not flinching at the grease under his nails or the sweat on his brow. Instead, she listened to his stories, asked about his late wife, about how he balanced everything for Sophie. Daniel found himself opening up in ways he hadn't for years. He told her about the nights he doubted himself, about the mornings he woke early just to pack Sophie's lunch with a silly note inside. Elena laughed, cried, and in her company, Daniel felt a lightness he thought he'd lost forever. What he didn't know was that Elena Harper wasn't just any woman. She was a billionaire. The head of a company whose name was etched on skyscrapers and whispered in boardrooms. She had grown up in a life Daniel couldn't imagine, surrounded by wealth and expectations that had crushed more than they had comforted. And yet, on that beach, stripped of everything but breath and survival, she had found something worth more than her fortune. At first, she kept her identity hidden. Not out of shame, but because she feared what it might mean. She wanted Daniel to know her as Elena the woman, not Alina the billionaire. And Daniel, in his simple honesty, treated her exactly that way. But secrets don't stay buried forever. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Daniel found himself flipping through a magazine left on the counter at a diner. His eyes froze on the cover. There was Elena, poised and flawless, headlines proclaiming her as one of the most powerful women in the country. The shock hit hard. When she arrived the next day, carrying Sophie's favorite cookies, Daniel confronted her gently but firmly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina's shoulders slumped. "Because I didn't want to lose this. With you, I'm not a name or a fortune. I'm just me." Daniel struggled. His world was oil-stained floors, overdue bills, ramen dinners. Hers was glittering galas and corporate empires. Could two lives so different really intertwine? Yet when Sophie ran into the room, squealing with joy at the sight of Alina, wrapping small arms around her waist, Daniel saw the truth. Alina wasn't playing a role, she cared. She had chosen them, not out of pity or obligation, but because something real bound them together. Still, doubts gnawed at him. Could he ever be enough for a woman like her? As if sensing his thoughts, Alina spoke softly. "You gave me something no one else ever has, life, not just on that beach, but every day since. Don't you see, with you I can finally breathe." Her words lodged deep in his heart, shaking loose walls he thought were permanent. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring out the window at the quiet street, Alina's words replaying in his mind. "With you I can finally breathe." It sounded impossible. How could a man who scraped together enough money to keep the lights on be the safe haven for a woman who could buy anything she wanted? But when he thought of her smile when Sophie tugged her hand, of the softness in her eyes when she listened to his stories, of the way she looked at him on that beach like he was the only anchor left, he couldn't deny the truth. She needed him, not his bank account, him. But accepting that didn't erase the storm around them. The press sniffed out Alina's visits to the small coastal town. Cameras followed her car. Headlines blared speculation about the billionaire and the mechanic. Daniel wanted to retreat to protect Sophie from the glare, but Alina stood firm. "I don't care what they say," she told him one evening, her voice steady as Sophie built sand castles at their feet. "I'm tired of living for their approval. I want to live for what's real." Still, Daniel feared what her world might do to theirs. He'd seen how fragile happiness could be. He had buried a wife, comforted a child through endless nights of tears. Could he risk opening his heart only to have it shattered again by forces far bigger than him? His doubts reached a breaking point one night after Sophie fell asleep. Daniel told Alina, "Maybe this isn't fair to you. You deserve someone who belongs in your world." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't flinch. She stepped closer, pressing a hand against his chest. "Daniel, I've spent my life in rooms full of people who looked like they belong. And yet I've never felt at home until now. Until here with you with Sophie. Don't push me away because of what you think I deserve. Let me choose what I want." Her voice cracked raw and unguarded, and Daniel realized she wasn't the untouchable billionaire on the magazine cover. She was just a woman who had nearly drowned alone on a beach, and had been pulled back into life by the one man who didn't see her as a trophy. From that night, something shifted. They stopped pretending their worlds couldn't collide. They let themselves laugh freely, cook together in Daniel's tiny kitchen, chase Sophie along the shoreline like they were kids again. Alina traded gala gowns for rolled-up jeans, finding joy in the ordinary moments money had never been able to buy. Yet the outside world kept pressing. Business partners warned her that her image would suffer. Tabloids painted Daniel as a gold digger, a widower chasing fortune. The weight of it threatened to pull them apart, but Alina refused to bend. In a boardroom meeting where her advisors urged her to protect the brand, Alina stood tall. "If my brand can't survive me being human," she said, "then maybe it's not worth protecting." News of her defiance made headlines, but for once, Alina didn't care. She drove back to the coast that night, slipped into Daniel's arms, and whispered, "I chose you. Not them, not the noise. You." Daniel, for the first time in years, believed he was enough. Months passed. Sophie adored Alina, calling her my best grown-up friend. Together, the three of them built a rhythm: school mornings, garage afternoons, beach evenings. The mansion Alina once lived in like a fortress became alive with Sophie's giggles echoing down marble halls, with Daniel's steady presence grounding her. And on the anniversary of the night he saved her life, they returned to that same stretch of beach. The waves whispered against the sand, calmer now, as if the ocean itself remembered. Alina stood barefoot at the water's edge, staring at the horizon. Daniel came up behind her, Sophie dancing ahead with her bucket of shells. "Funny, isn't it?" Alina said softly. "I thought that night would be the end of me. But it was the beginning." Daniel slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Sometimes the tide takes everything away. And sometimes it brings you exactly what you need." She turned, eyes glistening, and kissed him under the fading sun. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss, not fireworks and magic spells. It was something better, real, steady, born from fear and survival, grief and healing. It was two broken souls choosing to build something whole. For the first time since his wife's passing, Daniel felt the future wasn't something to fear but something to embrace. And for the first time in her gilded, lonely life, Alina felt rich in the only way that mattered. They walked back up the beach hand in hand, Sophie skipping between them, her laughter carrying on the breeze. To the world, Alina would always be a billionaire, a name etched in glass and steel. But to Daniel and Sophie, she was simply the woman who had turned a night of fear into a lifetime of love. Because sometimes the people we save are the very ones sent to save us.